Okay. Shana Tova, a good year, a sweet year. I'm sure that we're all written and sealed for a good and sweet year. Hope everybody had a wonderful Rosh Hashana. You heard the shofar, had apples and honey, new fruit, and all wonderful things. Most importantly, the hearing of the shofar, of course. So, speaking of the shofar, let's understand a little more about Rosh Hashanah. And so, first of all, if we look in the Torah, very interesting that the only thing that we find about it, it's called a Yom Teruah, a day of the blasts, the cry of the shofar. Which is interesting because when it comes to Pesach, well, the Torah tells us why we celebrate it, because we went out of Egypt. When it comes to Yom Kippur that's coming up, it says a day of atonement. Sukkot, we sit in booths because God protected us 40 years in the desert, clouds of glory, booths of protection. We have a reason for it. But no reason is given for Rosh Hashanah. So if we look, not in Chumash at least, but if we look in Nach, in Nevi'im, the prophets, in the Ksuvim, and in the holy writings that make up the 24 books of holy writings of the Torah. So we see that King David writes in Tehillim and Psalms, and he refers it to a day of the judgment of the Jewish people. Excuse me. That's how he refers to it. If we look in the in in the prophets, so we see in the book of Nehemiah, we see that when Ezra came to build the second holy temple in Israel, so it speaks about the gathering of the Jewish people on Rosh Hashanah. Words of Torah were read. The people were um, the, the people actually cried out, and then it says that the prophet said, "Go home and celebrate. Go home and celebrate. Eat meat, drink wine, celebrate the holiday." So it seems like they're two opposites that we have over here. On the one hand, it's a day of judgment, which would not be a day of celebration. It would be a day of great, um, self-evaluation, day of tshuva, repentance, bettering yourself. It doesn't sound like a day that you're going to go celebrate it, eat and drink. And yet, we have the eating and the drinking. So, how does that fit in? How do we make sense of that? Is it a day of judgment, and therefore it's a day that is um, a very serious day, or is it a celebrated day? Excuse me. I'm just coming off a cold. Or or is it a celebrated day? So let's look at the blast of the shofar. And if we understand the blast of the shofar, we'll have a better idea. So we have three different blasts of the shofar. Tekiah, which is the long one, right? It's a long blast. Then we have the shvarim, which is it's broken up. And then we have trua, which is so let's take the word of each one. The word tekiah comes from takua, which means embedded. That's speaking about the Jewish people and the Jewish soul, how it's embedded with the divine. And there, it's a pure wholeness. Not because we did something, but because we are something. We're pure, we're whole, right? Because we have a piece of God in us. It's embedded in us. That's the long blast. Then we have broken blasts, which are about the cry of the soul that there's some kind of brokenness of us. And the word, actually bring that across. Excuse me. Shvarim comes from a shever or lishbor, which means broken. So it's a do, 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 right? It's a broken sound because it's a cry of the soul that feels its brokenness. And then you have the da 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 is trua, which the word trua means a loud cry. So we have two different things over here. One is that I'm embedded with the divine in me, right? And as a result of that, how will that reflect itself? Well, that will be like in the book of Nehemiah that says, go celebrate. Eat meat, drink wine, celebrate. What are you celebrating? You're celebrating that you have a divine in you. That's the first point in celebration. We'll come to more. Not only that we have a piece of divine in us, as we'll see in a moment, right? And that's something to celebrate. But even more than that, we're celebrating that we can actually touch the divine. We can make a difference in God, which that's something very unique. Every believing person in God knows that we're dependent on God. He gives us livelihood. He gives us health. He gives us everything. But here, the message of the shofar is, the blast of the shofar is, in the tekiah, that we have a piece of God embedded in us, that we actually make a difference to God. We affect Him. We give Him the inner will by crowning Him as King, that we have that capability on Rosh Hashana to crown Him as the King. By crowning Him as the King, He has an inner desire for creation for us, and therefore to give vitality to the world. Like, it's the real reason why He wants to give vitality to the world, is because He wants the relationship with us, that we coronated Him as King. God needs His people to do that. You can't be a king over your own children or even your ministers. You can't be a king over. You have to be over the people. And a true king is someone that is chosen by the people. Otherwise, you're not a king, you're a despot, right? Otherwise, you're just a despot. You may be a ruler, a despot ruler, but you're not a king. A king is because the people want the king and choose the king. That's the concept in Jewish teachings. So we want the king, we want God. That's the idea of tekiah, of the blast, the single blast. Why do we want him? Well, because he's embedded in us, with a piece of him in us, and therefore that brings us to express that by wanting him. And not just wanting him, but that we have the power to coordinate him as king. Whoa. And who has the power? Not angels, not merely the righteous, but the simple cobbler, the simple silversmith, the simple individual Jew has that power on Rosh Hashana and brings life to themselves, their family, their community, and the entire world for that matter. Now, that becomes now a very responsible thing that we have as a Jewish people to do. And with that, therefore, comes responsibility. And then that becomes, am I keeping that responsibility properly? Am I living up to what God needs from me? So that's the other parts of the blast of the shofar. Shvarim, broken, because we're making a calculation inside of us. Are we living up to that? Trua, also loud cry. Am I living up to my purpose? So, and that's the idea that King David says is a day of judgment, the judgment of the Jewish people. Are the Jewish people, each and every single individual Jew, fulfilling what God created them for? To make a difference, not just in this world, but in the heavens above, in the divine above. Are we indeed making a difference? Are we changing the world for good? That's the other element of the shofar and what the holiday is about. So therefore, the Torah just tells us about the blast of the shofar. It doesn't, and that itself is the reason for the holiday. And the fulfillment of that mitzvah has the two components, the different blasts of the shofar. Now, what's important to remember is that whenever we blow, we always start with a tekiah. In other words, the empowerment that we have. The empowerment means, excuse me, oi, the empowerment that we have right, that we're embedded with a piece of God, the oneness of God in us, that gives us the capacity and now we could fulfill our mission. And now, did we fulfill it or not? That's the brokenness of checking things are broken. And in the end, though, at the end, we have a tekiah that sandwiches. We have tekiah on both ends. It's embedded on both ends, which has a double meaning over here. One meaning is the essence of the soul is embedded and perfect, one with God, united in one with God. The middle of the soul, which is our emotions, may be broken. Well, at the other end is also embedded in one with God, because that speaks about the levushim, the garments of the expression of the soul, which are thought, speech, and action, that we can, on that level, have perfect garments, perfect self-expression of thought, speech, and action in our commitment to God. We're capable of that. And that's one explanation. Another explanation is that after all is said and done, we should never, even if we failed to fulfill our mandate of changing the world for good, of taking the empowerment that I have in my soul, that is embedded a piece of God in it, that I have the great power to make a difference, not just in this physical world, but in the spiritual and divine worlds above, and to God Himself, that's never taken away, and that's sandwiched at the end, and we have to know that it's always there, a part of our soul, part of our makeup. It's our DNA. So that is a very powerful idea. Yeah, yes, there's a sliver of a moon, exactly, on the first day. Yeah. Can the shofar reach the soul, or is it just sensing from our emotions? For sure, it's reaching our soul. Okay. Any other thoughts, questions? All right. So, wishing everybody that we for sure are written and sealed for a good year, a sweet year, all good things should be blessed with. And we'll see you soon by Chumash. It's a fast day today, so there's slichas. Chumash is very short, so it'll be around 9 o'clock that we'll have our Chumash class, God willing. Okay, and then of course Tanya, Rambam. Thank you.